Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We're back here at the unboxing tree with a gun that's already unboxed because it's a used gun. It's a little old, but it's new to me. Now, I am a millennial, so what's retro to me might not be retro to people older or even younger than my generation. But when I think of a retro AR-15, what's burned in my DNA and what's burned in my mind of memories past is an M16 A2. Back in the day, Bushmaster, Colt, and Rock River, when I was a young person, those were like the big three names I heard everyone talking about when I would go to gun shows with my dad and my uncle. Those were the three ARs that were considered to be some of the best you could buy at the time. And I actually made a video not too long ago about Rock River, more specifically a 16-inch A2 mid-length AR that I had purchased, made by Rock River, that I thought was one of the coolest variants I'd ever come across. And it was so sad that Rock River really doesn't regularly make carry handles anymore. And a lot of the new stuff that they make is just kind of boring. And if you want to see that video, I'll be sure to link it down below. And I was a little tough on Rock River in that video. I beat him up pretty good. But I now have owned, 3 or 4 really cool old school Rock River ARs, and they really are some of the best quality ARs I've ever owned. And today, more specifically, I want to talk about this little guy, a 20-inch A2 H-bar with a couple of really special features. And honestly, an M16 A2, as a millennial, is burned in my mind as the coolest retro AR-15 ever. For some people, that's an M16 A1. For maybe people that are a little bit younger than me, that's probably like a maybe Gordy carbine, maybe like an M4. That's retro to them. For me, as a millennial, the sweet spot of retro ARs is A2 carry handles and certainly the 20-inch barrel M16 variant. We're currently in August of 2024, and I think we're still like fully engaged in a retro kick, certainly of AR-15s. This trend really seemed to start like hardcore maybe 2-3 years ago tops, when a lot of people really started saying no to the status quo, getting really bored with flat top ARs because they all really started to look the same, and started going back to get something new with old ARs. And another thing I've been noticing has gotten extremely popular in the last year alone are dissipators. Specifically, the North Hollywood dissipator, a gun that I had cloned probably about 5-6 years ago now. I'm seeing them in my Instagram feed constantly, which really just kind of pushes my point even harder that I don't really think we've seen the high watermark of the retro AR-15 craze just yet. Trends come and go, but it sure seems like it's still on the uptick. So this story begins like a lot of neat guns that I find walking around a random gun show, and I had it in my mind that I really wanted to find a cool carry handle that day. And this is probably like 7-8 months ago, and even at that time carry handles were becoming extremely popular, but it just seems like you don't see them very much at gun shows or even a lot of gun shops being sold new. So I remember I scoured the entire gun show. I didn't see a single carry handle in the whole place other than a Colt SP1 that was like $3,500 to $4,000. Totally out of my budget, not something that I was interested in. And then I remember stopping by a random gun shop on the way home that usually doesn't have anything good. But, when you've got money just burning a hole in your pocket, sometimes you just really kind of seek things out. You're ready to spend that money. And I actually chose wisely. Went into this place, and I see this sitting on the shelf, and I thought, whoa, M16 A2 clone. Asked the guy to let me take a look at it, and I saw it was a Rock River. The upper and the lower were Rock River. It was all a complete, unmolested, bone stock package, and the thing was like $1,200. I got it out the door for $1,000. For what it is, I think that was a hell of a deal, especially when I was like just ready to spend money on anything, any cool carry handle I could find. And it's very special that I found this one, especially because leading up to that point, I'd actually scored 2 really cool Rock Rivers. And none of that was planned. I wasn't actively seeking Rock River. That's just what it was. And it just is a little special that it takes me back to my youth when these things were everywhere and considered some of the best. So I bought it and I took it home and noticed that it is kind of a special thing. What's really interesting about this AR-15 is the specs on the barrel, it actually has a 223 Wild 1 and 9 twist heavy barrel, which is very uncommon, certainly for an old school carry handle. Another thing that's super freaking cool just about Rock Rivers in general, I don't know if this is something that they still do, but back in the day, they had a couple different triggers. They had a pretty okay single stage trigger, like a mil-spec trigger, and they had like an upgrade competition or precision 2-stage trigger with a very light trigger pull, and that's what this gun has. Pretty badass trigger if you've ever felt one. I remember back when I was like in high school, this is like early to mid 2000s, and I would, you know, go to gun shows and we would always say, oh dude, that Rock River's got that 2-stage trigger. Like, it was just such a cool thing, because even back then there were hardly any aftermarket triggers for ARs, very few back in those days. It's not like today where you have like a buffet of them. So Rock River was one of the first companies that I know of offering something like that, certainly with these old school guns. Another thing that's kind of interesting is that pistol grip. At first glance, it's a regular A2 shaped grip, but it's actually rubberized. It looks like they contracted out Hogue to make these rubber over molded A2 grips, and then they're stamped Rock River. So it's got the company logo on them, and it feels kind of cool. But from 10 feet away, you'd never know it was rubber. So it's like kind of cool, man. Upgraded grip, upgraded trigger, very interesting modern twist rate on the barrel, and you'd never know it unless you took a close look and messed around with it. There's just something so nostalgic and unique about looking down the barrel of one of these old A2s or even A1s. The carry handle optics just present such a nostalgic sight picture to me. Counter-Strike, video games, pretty much anything you've ever played with a setup like this, it's instantly recognizable, that sight picture. So we'll put a few rounds downrange into a target so you can see what it's like firsthand to shoot one of these. I'm sure you can hear that twang, twang, that distinctive noise that the buffer makes. Pretty cool. Nice. On that note of the S-tier iron sights, if you're gonna own a retro A2, I just think this is probably the best way to do it. It really is. The full length, fixed M16 stock, 20-inch barrel, the full length handguards with the thin clamshells, and then of course, the fixed sights giving you that long radius that these things were really designed to have, and you get the absolute maximum performance out of the round. Really, any round you put through this thing is just going to be such an experience, certainly out the distance, such a fun gun to shoot long range. And you know, maybe you don't go the H-bar like I did, the heavy barrel, get a slightly thinner contour barrel. There is no problem humping this thing around a range. As you're gonna see quite a bit in this video, I did run an optic on this thing today, and I do run an optic on a lot of carry handles, and my absolute go-to has to be the Trijicon RX01 on the Trijicon gooseneck carry handle mount. It takes no parts to add or remove from your gun, bolts right on, and when you get tired of it, you can take it off in a matter of seconds. They hold zero really well, and honestly, they look pretty badass on one of these old school guns. That has to be the one thing anytime I film it or take it somewhere I get the most questions about, is that optic setup. That's what it is. Old school Trijicon hardware. Looks really good on these old guns. So what's really cool about these dots, when you can co-witness, as long as your iron sights are zeroed, you can just zero the dot to the irons without a single shot fired, which is all I've done. Slap this thing on here, a couple of turns with a screwdriver, put the dot right on my front sight post at the tip, and we should be able to have a first round impact here. Perfectly fine. When it comes to these A2 retro guns, and I've got a few, you know, I've got at least 3 in varying states of retro themes. If I asked myself which one would I keep, I guess a better question is if you could only have one retro AR of any kind, dude, I'd probably go with a clone of an M16 A2 with the full-length barrel, the full sight radius, the full-length fixed stock, that pistol grip that everyone hates with the extra finger nub on it, just because it's, for my age, this is nostalgia. You've heard people say, like when they're into cars, that the Lamborghini Countach, that was my boyhood poster car. That's what I had in my room. That's what I stared at. That's what I aspired to buy one day. Well, at my age, as far as like guns being a poster gun, when I was young, M16 A2s, that was kind of it. They were in all the movies, all the video games. I mean, they were in freaking 007 GoldenEye, for crying out loud, which was like right there, like elementary school game I played day in, day out, and the M16 A2 was in that game. Probably the first time I ever kind of saw one or knew of one. Then my dad had stuff like this, so I was like, dang, that's the gun I had in 007. This would be the one. It checks every box of nostalgia and why I like guns for the sake of liking the way they look and the way they make me feel when I shoot. This is one of those guns. It doesn't have to be the most modern. It doesn't have to be easy to put suppressors on and all these different optics. It doesn't have to be that way. It makes me feel good. Makes me feel good when I shoot it. It takes me back to my childhood. Fond memories of shooting with my dad, my uncle, who had all this kind of stuff back then. So yeah, I think this is the gun to have if you're gonna have an A2. So I just thought of a question. If you have these cool old carry handle ARs, like what do you do with them? Are they like strictly for collecting? Are they just for cloning purposes? What's the point of owning them if you're not gonna shoot them? I am of the belief that any gun I'm gonna own, I'm gonna shoot. I'm not really into collecting. The second a gun turns into a collector gun or I don't shoot it much, I usually get rid of it, move on to something that I'm currently interested in, just the way I roll. So if I'm gonna have this stuff, I like the way they shoot and the way they make me feel, and I'm gonna shoot them. I like to shoot competitions. And one thing that's unfortunate, if I were to shoot any of these guns set up the way they are at a modern day competition, I'm gonna get beat by all the modern AR-15s out there. That's just the way it is. I just can't compete with some of the new stuff going on, the free floated barrels, the modern optics, the souped up triggers and the brakes. You can be a badass shooter with one of these and you're still probably not even gonna come in top 10. But what if there was a place that only let the old school guns in, that only had carry handle ARs and other cool Cold War guns, all made before 1986? Well, that does exist. So me and some homies tried something last year. We called it Lethal Weapons Texas. It was a retro shooting competition and event. This year we're doing it again just as a shooting competition. And we've even opened up a whole new subgun match for retro 9mm subguns. And if you really want to come out and like be competitive with a cool old collectible gun, it's really the only place to do it, because we can guarantee that everyone there is running something similar. You can even run optics this year, so long as it does not dramatically change the gun. So you can run them bone stock iron sights, which a real Chad would do, or there's open divisions where you can take a gun exactly like this, put that little Trijicon on there, not break any rules, and be able to shoot an open optic division, and do something that really hasn't been done since the Soldier of Fortune days. Something that's really cool to see as of August of 2024, although it might be a too little too late kind of deal, you're seeing a lot of manufacturers fully commit. Everything from FN to even Springfield to friggin' Bushmaster themselves are all making fixed carry handle, readily available options today. I think all of which are making the full-length M16 A2 clones. Colt obviously has their Heritage line. FN, I even believe, has a Heritage line, but those are a little overpriced. But just the other ones I just listed in general, a more affordable entry level, and probably the king of the castle right now, the H&R stuff. Now that PSA bought out H&R, they're making like everything under the sun cool and retro, even the cool old like Colt 635 A1 9mm clones. It's really cool to see that all these companies are getting behind it. 2-3 years ago, this whole like market of factory built carry handles had all but been extinguished. It was extinct, other than like Brownells. I think Brownells might have been a little too early to the retro game, and it seems like right when they got out of it, it exploded, and they might be getting back into it here and there. But I mean, you guys all remember they were making like A1 dissipator clones back in the day. Brownells was with all the Nodak Spud stuff. Well, PSA now owns all that stuff, and they are freaking capitalizing on it. But it's kind of unfortunate. Brownells really pioneered, I think, and really like lit the spark for maybe the retro craze that was maybe 2 to 3 years behind them actually making them. But it's just cool to see Bushmaster of all people. I never in a million years thought they would have started doing that again. But it's cool, man. Bushmaster's what got me into retro guns, because I've had this one for a very, very long time.